Morning. As Russell introduced me, my name is Jill Burns, and today I'm going to share with you some insight about my experiences participating in our church's Holy Conversation discernment process. The process of Holy Conversations is to explore an answer to the question, what is the difference God is calling us to make in the coming season of our church's life? I'll tell you more about that later. I have been attending First United Methodist Church here in San Marcos with my husband, Jeremy, and our almost 2-year-old son, Jackson, for about 6 years. In 2 weeks, I will complete my 15th year of teaching high school history in Pflugerville, which is north of Austin. Summer is coming. I love my job as a teacher, and I've always seen it as a vocation, as a way to be a model of Jesus' message of love and kindness. Oh, and I'm also a really big history nerd, and so that helps when you teach history. I really love to talk about history. The downside, though, to teaching in a school so far from home is that I struggle to feel a connection to our city. Apart from being with my family, I spend most of my time and mental energy elsewhere. However, I'm trying to change this fact, and in hindsight, participating in the Holy Conversations process helped me to understand our community and find other ways to engage with our citizens. To be candid, when Gerald asked if I would be a part of this Holy Conversations team, I almost said no. I was born and raised in the Catholic Church and only started attending the Methodist Church when I met my husband, Jeremy. So I have at best an elementary level of knowledge about the ways and means of the Methodist faith. And because of my job situation away from San Marcos, I didn't feel like I even knew enough about our town to make meaningful contributions to a conversation about what role our church should play in making our town better. Furthermore, like many people, I attend church weekly, I say my prayers at night with my son, and occasionally I help with projects like Vacation Bible School. But what do I really know about the direction our church needs to take? How easy it is to make excuses and use a lack of confidence to justify telling God no when he calls. So I told Gerald yes and committed to the Holy Conversations team. How does this Holy Conversations process work? Our team of about 13 members has been meeting once a month since September. Our meetings are about 2 hours long, and we explore many big picture questions about our church community. As a history teacher, on a side note, I loved this kind of work because this is what historians love to do. We thrive on asking these deep philosophical questions to get to the truth, whatever that may be. Our final product will be a report of specific recommendations of what kind of work God is calling our church to do. Church leadership will then receive this finalized report and decipher a plan of action based on the recommendations. Our facilitator has continuously emphasized that this is a discernment process. It has not been easy to explore some of the difficult questions about our church that we have encountered. We devoted time to discussing what our church does well and what we value. We're an historic institution here in San Marcos, and we have made the conscious decision to stay in this central urban location, as evidenced by the time and money devoted to acquiring the new parking lot. We embrace our traditional values and the fellowship we experience with our church family. However, we all agreed that we needed to do some exploring, and our church needs to step back and see how we fit into this rapidly evolving community of San Marcos. We spent 2 meetings exploring the question, what is the Bible story that this church is living? Let me tell you, I was in a nervous sweat when that was our homework assignment, because as a Catholic, Scripture is not my strong suit. We, read the Bible and study it, but not to the extent of some of our other fellow denominations. So this was a good learning experience for me. The narrative that we agreed upon was from the book of John, where Jesus tells the disciples who had been unsuccessfully dropping their nets on one side of their boat to drop their nets on the other side, which led them to a plentiful catch. Our church knows we need to drop the net. But our city's population is changing, and modern life is creating so many new challenges in society. Thus, we might need to find a new place in which we can metaphorically anchor our boat and then decide which side of the boat will work the best before we follow Jesus' instructions to finally drop the net and catch all of those fish. This then led our group to the difficult task of defining our mission field. And more importantly, to answer the question, who is my neighbor? And what is the condition of his or her life? For me, this is perhaps the most interesting aspect of our work. At first, I had no idea how to answer this question. Remember, because of my work situation, I often feel like St. Marcus is just the place where I sleep at night, and I've never really done much to get to know the people in the community beyond our church walls. Answering this question provided me with an opportunity to re-examine my own role and purpose in this town. So, who are the neighbors of our church? Sometimes, the answer to this question is visible and obvious. The university and its students, they're definitely our physical neighbors, but sometimes our neighbors are people who get overlooked, like the homeless, or people who are not interested in being churched. To get to know our neighbors and further explore the prospect of our church's mission field, the Holy Conversations team went out into the community and talked to people. I interviewed a retired justice of the peace, an employee of the city's housing authority. Other team members interviewed police officials, the director of the Hayes Caldwell Women's Shelter, public library employees, the director of the Boys and Girls Club, a public school counselor, and elementary school parents, the dean of students at Texas State, members of the homeless community, and others. Some of the main questions we asked in our conversations included, what is breaking God's heart in San Marcos? Whose needs are not being met? If you could magically fix one thing, what would it be? Many of the responses appeared to exhibit a few common themes. In San Marcos, a great divide is evidenced between the haves and the have-nots, the affluent versus the poor, or us versus them. I think back to the reading from Acts about the Gentiles versus the non-Gentiles. I don't think this gap in San Marcos was ever intended. It just happened. The divide spans across socioeconomic lines, geographic boundaries, cultures, education levels, and even generations. A second trend that emerged, the issue of mental health. Unfortunately, this is a challenge for our nation at large, and there's a conversation brewing about how to address it, especially in public schools. Issues with mental health can be the root of many other problems, such as drug and alcohol abuse, homelessness, crime, or domestic violence. Perhaps the most consistent theme that appeared in our conversations with community members related to the challenges faced by our local families. On a variety of levels, families and parents here in town are in need of structure, emotional guidance, practical guidance, and even coaching. The obstacles that San Marcos families encounter often relate to the previous trends I mentioned, poverty and mental health. These problems make it difficult for marriages to stay intact and for parents to remain engaged in a healthy relationship with their children. Young kids cannot focus in school, and the youth of our community cannot envision a life for themselves beyond their current conditions. One of our Holy Conversation team members asked the director of the Hayes Caldwell Women's Center, "Who is lonely in San Marcos?" The answer surprised everyone. "Men," she said. The director reasoned that men often succumb to gender stereotypes of machoism and that they should not exhibit true emotions such as fear or sadness. Thus, they're missing the support that they might need to get them through a tough time. Young boys raised in situations without an admirable male role model grow up anchorless and unable to navigate the ups and downs of life. As a high school teacher working in a Title I school, where the majority of my students live in low-income housing, I see evidence of this every day. So why did this fact about lonely men in San Marcos surprise me? In John's gospel that we heard today, Jesus delivers us a new commandment. You must love one another. We know that we must love our neighbor and treat everyone with kindness and compassion. We believe in this new commandment. That's why we're here every week in church. But like our church's biblical story, about Jesus telling the disciples to cast their nets on the other side of the boat, we need to be open to who all of our neighbors are and what they really need from our church community. Sometimes the neighbors that need to experience our love might not be so obvious. Perhaps I am guilty of focusing so much time on one neighbor that I neglect the hidden problems of others around me. As a church community, how do we focus our mission field so that we are doing the greatest amount of good for the largest amount of people? If you're expecting me to answer this question today, I'm sorry, you're about to be disappointed. The Holy Conversations team is still discerning what we need to do and what we need to learn as a church community in order to do God's work. As my husband Jeremy so eloquently once stated, we're just the good idea fairies. Pastor Russell also made a good analogy in one of our meetings. The pregnancy is still in process, but there's no baby yet. Nevertheless, one thing is certain. Our belief in the teachings of Jesus has instilled in us values that we must share with our neighbors. Jesus stated in our gospel, "If you have love for one another, then everyone will know that you are my disciples." God has a plan for each of us within our church community. What does God want this church to be, and what is my role in it? In what ways can we show love to our neighbors so that we are truly acting as disciples of Jesus? In your prayers, I please ask that you pray for our Holy Conversations team as we continue this work and try to discern what it is our church needs to be in our changing community. I give you the gift of silence for reflection.